Hi darlings, Mimi G here with another sew along as part of my Mimi G for Simplicity pattern collection. Today we're going to be sewing up pattern 1016, which is part of my fall collection, and it's this amazing coat and cape. In this video we're going to start by making our cape, which is view B. If you're new to sewing or you just need a refresher course, make sure and visit the Sewing Basics video linked in the description box below, where I talk about cutting out your pattern pieces, what size to cut, how to cut your pattern pieces out of your fabric, how to read and understand all of the information that is printed on your pattern pieces, and a whole lot more. Once you're done with that, come back and sew along with me. Let's go over the pattern pieces that you should have cut. Now you should have cut pattern piece number 24, which is our collar. Now I want to point out, which I did this in the Sewing Basics video, but I just want to touch on it again. I want you to make sure that you are reading all of the information that is on your pattern piece. This, for example, says cut 2 out of fabric and cut 2 out of interfacing. I want to make sure that you're reading all of the information that is on your pattern pieces so that you don't forget to line a piece or to interface a piece. Now you're also going to need to cut out pattern piece number 23, and this is also interfaced. You're going to be cutting out pattern piece number 25, pattern piece number 22, pattern piece number 21. You are going to be cutting out pattern piece number 19 out of both lining and fabric, and pattern piece number 20 also out of fabric and lining. Now that we have all of our pattern pieces for our cape, we can get started. Okay, we're going to start sewing our cape. So I want you to grab your front piece and your back piece, and the first thing we're going to do is sew the center back of our cape. So you should have 3 notches, all right, and we're going to stitch this down using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. And I want you to go ahead and press this seam open. And then what we're going to do is we're going to stitch down. You should have a little notch or a dot, whichever you marked. And we're going to stitch through all layers, right? Right sides are facing each other, about 2.5 inches down. All right, back stitch. Now what we're going to do is you're going to open this up, and you're going to open out that pleat like this, right? You're going to open it, and you're going to align your seam line, and go ahead and pin, and then we're going to sew across the top so that this stays in place. Now I'm going to stay stitch my neckline. You want to stay stitch in opposite directions, so I already did this way, and now we do it this way. That's to keep the collar or the neck from stretching. And now you can go ahead and give this a good press. And then you're going to get your front pieces. And with right sides facing each other, you're going to align your notches. So you should have some side notches. And you're going to pin side of your cape. And you're going to pin the other one the same way. And we're going to stitch this using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. do the same thing to the other side. Okay, I have pressed all of my seams open. And I also pressed my pleat. Now you're going to sew the lining pieces the exact same way that we did this. So set this aside, rewind if you need to, and sew your lining pieces the same exact way and stop at this point. Okay, I want you to go ahead and grab your loop, which is pattern piece 21. What we're going to do is we are going to bring this towards the middle, like this, and then you're going to fold it over again and press it, and then we're going to sew close to this edge. So go ahead and press this all the way down, meeting in the middle, and then fold it over again and press. Okay, I have it pressed, and now I'm going to fold it over onto itself, and we're going to sew close to the edge. Now we have our loop. I want you to cut that long piece in half so you end up with two. And then I'm going to have you fold it over and we're going to close this, creating a loop. Turn it over, set it aside, and we're going to do the same thing to the other one. Now I want you to grab your shoulder tabs, and with right sides facing, we're going to sew using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Clip into your corners. Turn this right side out. And go ahead and poke out your corners. And starting at one end, we're going to sew some top stitching all the way around. Now I want you to make the other one the same exact way, and then give this and your loops a good press. Okay, now you should have notches or had marked dots where your shoulder tab is going to be. So in the middle, in between these two spaces here, these two pins here, I'm going to place one of my rings right in the middle, and I'm just going to tack it down. So I'm going to put it through my machine, and I'm going to just literally stitch it down. I think it lays flat better that way. So that's how come I do it that way. And then what you're going to do is you're going to place your tab facing the bottom of your cape, and we're going to stitch it down right about 1/4 of an inch, and then we're going to fold it over, do the loop, and then tack it down with our button. So where that bottom pin is, I want you to stitch across, making sure that your shoulder tab is centered on your seam. Beautiful. And then you're just going to flip it over. And I'm going to have you top stitch, keeping your presser foot edge along the edge or the folded edge of your shoulder tab. Beautiful. Cut off any loose threads. And then you can go ahead and just pin your shoulder tab down until we sew our button on. You're going to do the other one the same exact way. Okay, we're going to pin our lining to our cape, so with right sides facing. I want you to pin along the front edge and along the entire bottom of our cape. Continue pinning until both your front and the entire bottom of your cape and lining are pinned together. Do not pin at the neckline. Once you have it all pinned down, we're going to go ahead and sew using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way down the center front, along the bottom, and up the other center front. Once you're done, go ahead and trim your seam allowance to about 3/8 of an inch. All the way across the bottom, and then I want you to trim your corners. Now what we're going to do is we are going to understitch. So we're going to be understitching, which means sewing only on our lining, making sure to catch the seam allowance, so all of the seam allowance should be facing the lining, and we're going to sew about 1/8 of an inch away from that seam. Okay, go ahead and turn your lining right side out through your neck opening. Use your scissors to poke out your corners and then give this a good press. Once you've given it a good press, I want you to go ahead and pin your neck opening, and we're going to baste this closed so then we can work on our collar. Make sure you're aligning your shoulder seams. And just baste this together. set this aside for just a second and grab your collar and your neckband. Okay, now that it's basted together, grab your interfaced collar band, your neckband, and I want you to align your notches. Of course, right sides are facing. And in at your shoulder. And it's going to extend 5/8 of an inch like this on both sides. Perfect. And now I want you to stitch this down using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Make sure that you don't have any folds underneath there. Go, like this. And now I want you to give this a press and clip into any curves that you need to. And I want you to press your seam allowances up towards the neckband. And then I want you to set this aside and grab your collar. Okay, I want you to grab your collar, and with right sides facing, we're going to go ahead and pin along the side, and then pin a couple times across the bottom. And we're going to sew using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Go ahead and trim your corner. Go ahead and turn this over. Poke out your corners. I want you to press this, and then we're going to do some top stitching. Now that my collar's pressed, I am going to do some top stitching. So just keeping my presser foot along the edge of my fabric. Once you have finished top stitching along your collar, we're going to attach it to our cape. So we're going to first align our double notches with the double notches on our neckband and pin there. That's why it's so important to transfer notches and dots. Remember that the neckband extends 5/8 of an inch. And now you're going to sew through all layers. Now we have attached our collar. And now we're going to grab the other facing and we're going to lay it right over the collar. And we're going to align our double notches again. It's getting a little thick in this area, so just go slow. Move this collar out of the way. And I want you to turn under that 5/8 seam allowance, and I want you to pin just to keep it together. Okay, like that. And we're going to start there actually. So I'm going to put my needle right at the beginning of that. So, across the top. And if you're using a wool and it's getting a little thick, just go slow so you don't break the needle. Now I want you to go ahead and trim your corners. And that way when you pull your collar out, it's nice and flat. And then we can slip stitch this closed at the end of all the sewing. I'm just going to go ahead and pin right there to keep it all together on the corner, and then I'm going to turn over the other side. So go ahead and clip. And pull your collar. And you can continue to turn under that 5/8 of an inch and pin all the way, and then we can slip stitch this closed. Now we're going to set this aside for just a second. And I want you to grab our neck tab. We're going to sew this all the way around, leaving a 1-inch opening so that we can turn this right side out. And we're using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. scooch on over. And I'm going to turn this to the inside. Okay, now that it's nice and flat, I'm going to place my needle right at the edge, and I'm going to top stitch all the way around. Once you're done top stitching, you can go ahead and make your buttonhole. You will need to read your instruction manual that came with your sewing machine on how to make a buttonhole for your sewing machine. Once you're done making your buttonhole, we're going to go ahead and slip stitch. There's a lot of great videos on YouTube on hand sewing if you want a more detailed look. And continue until you have completely hand stitched your neckband facing. And then we'll add our button to secure our neck tab, and we will be all done. Okay, now we're going to attach our buttons, and we are all done. So I just want to show you how to do the one for the shoulder tab, and then we can you can continue on adding the buttons yourself for the shoulder tabs. So we're going to bring our neckband together, and I am going to place this right in the middle just so I can get a gauge, and then I'm going to sew through all layers. And I'm going to stitch it down, and I'm going to do that a couple of times. And then I'm going to tie this off. And then I know that that's where my next button needs to go. And I'm going to hand stitch my button the same way that you just saw me do the other one. And then I'm going to hand stitch a button at each of the shoulder tabs. And you are all done.